Okay, this is July 24th, and I'm here with Poli Marichal doing an interview. Poli, why don't we begin? This is more about your life story elements and the consejo. Let's just start with your childhood, when you were born, your siblings, your early schooling, and if there was anybody in that period in terms of your later development as an artist.
Okay. Well, I was born in Ponce, Puerto Rico. My parents, mother is Puerto Rican and my father is Spanish. He was a refugee from the Spanish Civil War. My mother was born in Yauco. Actually, she was born in Guayanilla, but grew up in Yauco. Yauco is a mountain town in the south of Puerto Rico. It's a coffee town. Some of the best coffee in the world. Not because it's my town, but it's really good coffee. The Vatican, that's the coffee they used to drink. And my parents probably had the biggest influence in my life. You know, I grew up in a household that, you know, they had a home that was very creative. My father being a set designer and printmaker too. He started the printmaking department at the University of Puerto Rico. The etching department, they didn't do etching until, you know, basically my father came from Mexico. He studied at the Escuela de las Artes del Libro, el Instituto o Escuela, no me acuerdo, I don't remember the title, but he also studied set design in Mexico and worked as a set designer for the Palacio de Bellas Artes in Mexico City. And in a way, he brought to Puerto Rico lithography. The first lithographs were done when my father set up a lithography studio at the university. And as a child, my house was always full of artists, and I had a very colorful childhood because my mother was an actress in the theater, and my father taught theatrical design. He designed a lot of the sets for a lot of the productions, and also taught printmaking at the university. So we always, when they didn't have any money for babysitting, they had 6 kids, so we were always hanging out at the university. That's where I learned how to ride a bike, etc. And we also were backstage all the time. So I learned a lot about life and actors in particular, but a lot about hanging out with adults all the time. I remember my mother was, can I talk?
Oh.
I remember, because I have so many stories, but my mother worked in this play called Los Soles Truncos. It's a play by René Marquez. It's a wonderful play of these 3 sisters during the transition between when the Americans invade Puerto Rico. And my mother played the younger sister, Hortensia, and the older sister was played by one of the best, probably one of the best actresses Puerto Rico has ever given, Esther Sandoval, and she was a character. And when they were rehearsing, the things, you know, we learned, my sisters and I learned the plays from watching so many rehearsals. But every time, you know, she had to go to her dressing room, and she drank quite a bit. And the director, René Marquez, told, no drinking in this theater, you know, while I'm I don't want, you know, you to go into the, you know, because she would become really drunk. And she had a 7-Up bottle, and she would tell me, Poli, búscame la botellita de 7-Up. So, and at first I thought it was 7-Up, but I was always very curious, so I unscrewed the bottle. I said, this is not 7-Up, this is wrong. She was quite, you know, so I mean, I learned a lot.
¿Y cuántos hermanos y hermanas tienes?
Somos 5 hermanas y un hermano. My brother is the 4th one. He was the prince, and we were the slaves.
As usual.
Yeah, he was the prince. He had his own room. We all shared rooms. So my brother was the privileged one in that way, you know, because my father thought he's the only boy. So I don't want my boy to be too, you know, with girls all the time. Although, you know, anyway. But he was, and when he was a little boy, and he's very dark. When he was a little child, I was so thrilled having a brother. I called him my Arab prince, and my father would tell me, quit calling him that, you're going to spoil him.
What did he wind up doing, your Arab prince?
My Arab prince is a physiologist. He was into sports and stuff, so He teaches physiology at the University of Puerto Rico, and he's now heading the department of physiology, and he is also an athlete. You know, he used to be an incredible basketball player until another player broke his knee. They gave him and he couldn't play anymore. But now he's a cyclist, and he always says, "I'm going for a little ride," and he goes like from San Juan to Arecibo and back, and I go like, a little ride, you know, it's like, I don't know how many miles.
So your artistic thing was a general artistic milieu of actors and poets and playwrights and painters.
Yeah, I knew Omar was a very good friend of my dad. So I grew up with Susan, Omar, and
why don't we give their full names for the
Oh, Lorenzo Omar, he was an incredible printmaker. He also had an incredible history. He worked with the Ringling brothers as an equilibrist, and then he worked for Cartier as a jewel designer. He had all these anecdotes. I love to talk to him because he would always tell us these incredible stories. And when I was little, I loved to go to his house because they had 2 dachshunds that were the cutest dogs. So but anyway, the thing is, you know, I'm going to ramble quite a bit. So, but Omar Alicea was also a good friend of my father's. Tufino, Tufino was a riot. Tufino was probably one of the best artists, if not the best artist in Puerto Rico. Huh?
Ninfa Tufino's father.
Yeah, Ninfa Tufino's father. And he was an incredible artist and a real bohemian. I mean, he always told my father, "Carlos, you're too good," because Tufino had about 5 wives, and my father only had 1. So all of these guys, you know, they had like all these. They were biblical, you know. It's like crecer y multiplicados, you know. They follow it to the rule, you know, like to the letter. And they all had a ton of children, and a lot of women, and my father had a lot of children with just 1.
So let's jump over until your university training, and then.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I went to a Catholic school from kindergarten till high school. In Puerto Rico, you know, my father was like not so interested in the religious aspect, but in the educational aspect. So I went to a school that was pretty good, and the nuns all had masters or PhDs. They were really well trained. They were a little on the sadistic side, but that's another issue. But you know, it was a good education.
What was it called?
El Espíritu Santo, Colegio Espíritu Santo.
In San Juan.
In San Juan, it was in Floral Park. Near Rio Piedras, near my parents' home. And my parents lived, our house was really close to the university. And as a child, my father, every summer, since, you know, they never had money to send us to summer camp or anything, my father was the summer camp leader in our house, and he hated idleness, you know. He would tell us, "Yes, you know, I don't want to see my kids in front of the TV all day. You go out," so we would play, and then he would say, "And now we're going to do drawing," and so he would put like stuff, and we would teach us the basics of drawing. And he always told me, it's incredible I became an artist because my father was really tough, and he would say, "What's wrong with your eyes?" Because he said, "Draw a glass," and my sister Flavia, she's the eldest one, and she's now the director at the University of Puerto Rico. She drew like, you have no idea. She can draw a glass like perfect. My glasses looked like they had shattered, and then I put them back together. And my father would say, "What's wrong with you?" And I was like, "Oh my God, what's wrong with you?" Because I would look at her and say, "How come she can draw?" So I was a little, you know, but I kept trying, you know. And my sister just decided she didn't want to be an artist. So I don't know.
So, and your artistic training?
When I was about 9, my father, you know, he was always so busy, he couldn't teach me that much. But I watched him a lot. I was always looking at his work. But Mirna Baez, who had been my father's student, she started having classes in her house for children. So I was Mirna Baez's pupil from 9 to 12. And she was really tough, my God. But she just does print. You know, I did my first liner cuts with Mirna Baez.
When you were how old?
9.
Line of prints with.
Yeah,
with
when we did color line of prints, reduction prints, and the whole thing. And she was very, it wasn't just, okay, kids, draw whatever you want. No, she really drove us. And we would have to do like still lives and the whole thing. And then she would say, okay, still lives. And I was like, and she would put a pear and an apple, and I hated it. But then she said, and now you can draw whatever you want. And I was into like doing like I love history, so I was always reading about the Aztecs and the Egyptians and the whole thing. I remember once I did she said, you can do whatever you want. I did an Aztec sacrifice, so I did this guy with the blood coming with the heart. And she told my mother, Flavia, esta nena hay que llevarla al psiquiatra. Every time we tell her to draw, she draws these horrible scenes of destruction. Oh my God. But I learned a lot with her. She was very disciplined. She'd work no matter, and she always said, an artist is not just, you can have all the talent in the world, but if you don't work,
the discipline,
that's it. You're not going to get anywhere. So she drove us like a slave master. So, and then in high school, at my school, unfortunately, the nuns all thought that if you didn't become a doctor, an engineer, or an architect, you were a total failure. And I wasn't that good in math. I am a little dyslexic. I'm telling you. So a lot of the nuns, I had a nun who told me, Poli, when you grow up, you're going to live in a casita en La Perla. La Perla is the worst neighborhood in Puerto Rico. And I said, really? And I said, we'll see to that, sister. I wish I knew where she is now. But anyway, but the nuns were, at Catholic school, I learned a lot from them. I learned also about survival. But in high school, my father got really ill when I was 12, and he died when I was 14. So for a while there, we were in. It was a big blow to us. He was a wonderful father, and for my mother it was really tough because when she married my father, she was 1 year short of finishing her master's. So, and she had been an actress and wrote for the television and stuff. But when he passed away, suddenly she was with 6 kids who were in Catholic school. And my father never made a lot of money, so she went back to the university to study, and she studied nights to finish her master's. She became an instructor at the university in the literature department, and my older sister and I, we sort of took care of the kids, and I started working I started working, we all started, the eldest one started working part-time during the weekends to get some money to pay for our expenses and stuff, because my mom was like, my first job was at Velasco. It was this department store for the rich and, for the elite. Well, not for, but the elite went there to buy a lot. And my first job was wrapping gifts during Christmas. And even though we needed the money, one of my first days of, I think it was like my second week of work there, I was wrapping gifts and the line was like, shh. And then the manager comes with this guy and says, Nena, wrap these gifts to this guy. And the guy looked at me like, I'm coming in an hour to pick them up. And I asked the manager, isn't he going to be in line? And I said, Nena, no, he's one of our preferred customers. And I was like, and I saw the line of people and all the people, and I said, so I put the bag down and I kept wrapping and an hour later, the guy comes, Nena, where are my gifts? And I said, when you do the line, I'll wrap them. And the guy was like, what? So he went like a rocket to the manager's office and said, soy Solente, and the manager came back, ay, nena, ¿qué tú has hecho? This is one of our best customers. And I said, I don't care. If he doesn't do the line, I am not wrapping them. And I was 15 years. And you know, they were doing it as a favor because you had to be 16 to get it. But the owner was a good friend of my father's. So the manager went to talk to Antolin Velasco, who was the owner of the, and my father and and when they told Antolin, he started laughing. But you know, the manager was furious, and I told him, "Don't worry, I quit," and I walked out. And you know, I went home and I said, "Mommy, you know, this happened, and I don't know, if you want to, I'll go back tomorrow." And my mother said, "Mi ninguna hija mía va a doblegarse ante nadie. You did the right thing, I don't care." So then I got another job, but high school, you know, those years were really hard. So I mean, I didn't take any art classes or anything until then. You know, when I graduated from high school, I went to Escuela de Artes Plásticas, where I had incredible. I studied with Martorell, with Hernandez Cruz, with a lot of really wonderful teachers, and I took music with Amaury Veray, who was my mother's first boyfriend. He was an incredible composer, and I took art history with oh my God, I forget.
Yo lo único que conozco es Marimar Benítez.
Oh yeah, I know her too. Yeah. She came later. Yeah, and she did an incredible labor to raise the school to an incredible level. Yeah.
So ahí también aprendiste litografía.
Sí, I studied lithography, etching, silkscreen, relief printing. I mean, Alicea was an incredible teacher, and Martorell, forget it. You know, he was incredible. I took silkscreen with Martorell, and with Alicea I took etching and relief print making. With Omar I took some classes too of woodcut, and with Hernandez Cruz I took some painting classes and color theory. And then I applied for a scholarship because when I was 16, you know, my father had when he passed away, my mother found out he was paying for an insurance. It was $15,000, and my mother said, "Children, we have $15,000 that we didn't thought we would have. Your father always wanted you to go to Europe to meet the family." Because my father always said, "I'm never going back to Europe until Franco dies," you know, to Spain. And then, you know, my father died before Franco. So, so the thing is, my mother said, "We could put the money in the bank so you can study it later on, or we can go to Europe." And we said, "Let's go to Europe." So we bought Eurail passes, you know. And my sister Flavie was already at the first year at the university, and she was our guide because she had been studying art history. She had a list of all the places we had to see. So we spent 2 months and a half traveling in Europe on the trains and staying at the cheapest motels and hostels, you know, we could find. And we had so much fun. You know, my younger sister was 6. I was 16. My sister Flavie was 18. And we traveled, you know, with my mother, and it was great in Europe, in Italy especially. When they see a mother with all these kids, everywhere we would go, you know, we would go to a trattoria to eat, and they would give us this super big plate, and they would say, "Dessert is on the house," and "Bella signora." And my mother was, yeah, my mom is really, I mean, she was really good looking, and so everywhere we went, she got, you know, my mother was like, "Niños, protéjame," because all the guys were like, "Señora," you know, and my mom was, "Nenes." So we had a great, you know, it was a great education, and we went to Barcelona. And when I went to Barcelona, I said, I have to go back, you know. So I applied for a scholarship, and I went to Barcelona for 2 years to the Escola Massana, where I studied retablo y policromía, because I was really interested in medieval painting and and La Massana had a really good department where you learn, like you were in the Middle Ages, you had to grind the pigments and do everything the way it was done in the Middle Ages. So I also took some etching classes and, well, you know, the art history and this and that. And I had a great time. While I was at La Massana, I discovered La Cinemateca Nacional, which was like my my downfall. But I discovered La Cinemateca. So, and they started showing films at 12 in the morning, in the
Midday.
afternoon, and until midnight. And they would have like all these retrospectives. So I had this conflict: study or go to see films. And they would give you a 10-film pass. So sometimes I would be in La Mazana at a class, and I would go look at the, today they're showing this film, so I would, and I would, and the Bedelio at La Mazana would say, señorita, la van a reprobar, you're going to fail. And I said, no se apure, I'll recover later. But I had this thing, it was an incredible education, and because I learned a lot about film, which is another of my passions, and I learned a lot about art. And being in Barcelona, which is such an the architecture, it's like you're breathing history and art. And I mean, the Museo Picasso. So I had the greatest time, and I had the smallest scholarship in the world, because at Instituto de Cultura, they think they give you $150 a month and you're going to survive. So, and I went with my a sister who is a year younger, who is a complete rebel, and my mother was having a really hard time with her. And my mother said, oh, you're going to Barcelona, take your sister. So my sister and I lived on one scholarship. So I had to take a morning job, so I worked for this editorial company doing illustrations for books. It's one of these editorial companies that publishes a lot of Santeria books. So I did a lot of Santeria covers. It was a lot of fun.
Y aprendiste todo
all the
religión popular, los santos populares.
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
So then you're studying at the university. You get you got this incredible house thing. So then let's jump. You got married.
Yeah.
And came to Los Angeles.
Yeah.
And is that where you started the Los de Abajo?
Yeah.
Yeah,
the history of Los de Abajo is kind of, I was teaching at Self-Help Graphics. I was teaching printmaking. Because, after Sister Karen saw that I was serious, about art and the whole thing, they started giving me more and more, like they would give me the keys to the film department. Then I started developing classes. So I started teaching, I taught a class in colograph, a class in relief printmaking, a class in monoprint, and
This is self-help.
Yeah, self-help.
This is when Sister Karen was still there.
It was the last year of Sister Karen, when she was still alive. That I started doing classes there, teaching, and then during Thomás's tenure, I taught several classes too. And then it closed for a little bit, and then that's when we went to do the film in Puerto Rico. And when I came back, I started teaching another class in monotype, and that's when I met most of the members of Los de Abajo. From students, they became my colleagues. We started, there was another guy, professor there, and Agustín Barón, and we started talking, why don't we do a group? Because before that, we had been part of the group. Artemio had started at Self-Help, which was the Colectiva de Grabadores. And Artemio left, and we said, why don't we continue? And since we were in the first floor, and people always say, vayan a hablar a los de abajo, los de abajo. We said, well, we're Los de Abajo, plus we're Los de Abajo in the sense that we really wanted to do printmaking, not just as in the whole individualism thing. We wanted to do collaborative works, where we all worked in one print and stuff like that, and also do a lot of labor in the community, giving workshops to children and to also to adults. So the group started in 2002, and it has had many configurations. At one point we had about 15 members, and now we're down to 6 because a few went back to Mexico, and some moved out of the state and stuff.
Who were some of the original group when you were at Self-Help and started the Los de Abajo?
Los de Abajo eran Agustín Barón, Don Newton, Kay Brown, they're still members, Imelda, let me see, Antonio Escalante, who now lives in Tijuana, Judith,
Judith Hernandez?
No, it's last name. I have to check because we had a big roster of members, and right now we're only 6. So, but we've had many exhibitions. We had the first exhibition as a group that we had was as self-help graphics, and we did.
Was there a uniting philosophy?
Yeah.
Would you talk a little bit about that?
Well,
and how what was going on with the social movement around influenced that or not?
Our main goal as a group is to do collaborative work because we found that doing prints where we all worked on the same print, you learn a lot more than when you're doing it on your own, because it's also an aspect of collaboration is that you're not so, the ego has to step aside and you have to work for the group instead of just for your own benefit, you know. And then you are exposed to different styles and techniques, and so it becomes like a really exploration of the medium, and everyone brings whatever they know. And so our group basically has the feature that distinguishes us from other groups is our sense of collaboration, and the fact that we're doing works where we do big prints where you know they're made. It's like a little kaleidoscopic vision of Los Angeles, or we did a portfolio on migration, and each one did a print, but it's 22 by 30, and it's 10 prints in the portfolio, and each one used a different technique. So some people did relief printmaking, some people did etching, some people did mixed media, mixing different techniques in the same print. And we did a print about dreams, and it's a miniature portfolio. The prints are really tiny. It's like 2 inches by 2 inches. Then we did another portfolio, human needs. So we did. Everybody could do. It had to be 3 prints by each artist using 3 different techniques. So every time we did a project, it was like challenging ourselves to push the envelope a little on the printmaking. And then we did a huge piece that is called Drawing the Line, where what we did is we put a long paper on a table and we started doing like a jigsaw puzzle. Then we cut it up, and people would take from a little paper, and if you got number 1, you got number. Each piece had a number. That way, you know, it's not like, oh, I want this one. No, it's whatever you got. You got. And then you had to develop a print using any technique you wanted to. So when we put the piece together, the piece is composed. It has relief, dry point, colorgraph, etching. You know, and it's really big. It looks like a map. And after that, we did another work. We did a work about the Mujeres de Juárez, and since a lot of them work in the garment district, we did a huge T-shirt. And that is a combination of printmaking, stamping, painting, drawing, and it's a huge, pretty large piece. Lately, we did a portfolio about the Mexican Revolution, and you know, Mariane, Kay, and I all did portfolios about the soldaderas, and Don did one that was more about the history of La Revolución. So, and Victor Rosas did a more contemporary thing of himself as part of the revolution. So it was, and we showed it. We've already shown it in many, you know, at the Tia Chuchas, at Austin, Texas, different spaces around Los Angeles, and we also, as part of that project, because the opening, the first exhibition was at Tia Chuchas, we did a horse that is a sculptural work using styrofoam and metal and all sorts of things, and then it has prints pasted, and it's very expressionist horse, and it's called the Spirit of Revolution. So you know, the works we do. Every time we do one, we say, let's do something a little different. And we all work together. It's like a crazy thing. We did the horse in my studio, and we had so much fun cutting all the pieces and putting the horse together. And no, let's do it this way. But the thing is, since it's not such a small group, I mean, such a large group, And we've done it quite a few times now. It's like we have one brain, and it's an incredible exercise. Because I do a lot of I also have my studio and I do my own work, but I love doing collaborative work. So it's been
your own work. What is do you have any thematic, any overriding?
Oh, I've had many, but right now I'm doing developing a series on homelessness. And I'm using the shopping cart as a symbol because the shopping cart is a symbol of consumerism, but at the same time it's becoming a symbol of survival of the disenfranchised and how they survive and use their creativity. I love in Los Angeles. There's no place where they're everywhere because so many homeless in the city. And the way they pack and wrap their things, and some of them collect stuffed toys, and you see how these people who have been so stepped upon are using that shopping cart in such a creative way. It's their home, it's their luggage, it's a projection of their personality, it's all these things. So lately I've been doing a series of works inspired by the shopping cart and the homeless in Los Angeles. I did a solo exhibition in 2009. It's called Sleepwalking in Los Angeles, and it has a lot to do with the homelessness and my vision of, I walk a lot in Los Angeles, which you become almost like, it's like me sleep because there's nobody on the street. It's like you're walking in your dream or something. And after that exhibition, I have an exhibition right now that is a continuation of that, but the other one was all painting on canvas. And this year I did a mixed media on paper. And some of the pieces are large. I've been like tearing stuff from the streets, from like graffiti, and I've been using that to incorporate it into some of the, it's a combination of, it's oil on paper. So I sand the paper, and then I apply transparent gesso to the paper. So it becomes really receptive to any mediums, especially oil, because it protects the paper from the oil, but at the same, the paper becomes a little stronger, and you can do a lot of it. So it's all the things I love, because I love scraping and mixing media and the whole thing. And cooking. Painting is like cooking, and cooking is like painting, because you're working with colors and textures and.
So in terms of the concilio, of the consejo, ¿cuándo empezaron a trabajar con el consejo? ¿Cómo se integraron?
Since I was teaching at Self-Help Graphics participated in the first portfolio, which was Creando Fuerza, and they asked me to do a print. And I went to the consejo meeting, and when I said, listen, I submitted our group to be a member, and they said, sure, you can become a member. So then we've been participating as not as part of Self-Help, but on our own. And it's been very beneficial to the group in the sense that I think it stimulated the group to work more, and having the exposure, having the opportunity to exchange with other printmaking groups. It's been really enriching.
In terms of these are just some general questions. How you see, for example, the whole graphic print, whatever form of prints, in terms of do you think that, in terms of Latino specifically, do you think that the new generation is sort of like coming, or is it? How is it seen in Los Angeles? With all the art schools and all that, is there a strong graphic?
In the Latino community, it's pretty strong, because we give workshops, and there are some groups that are emerging. That are, Daniel Gonzalez, it's a young printmaker from Boyle Heights. He's a wonderful printmaker, right? And now he had a commission with the Metro, and he did one of the stations. I think it's the La Ciénaga station. He's in his late 20s, and he's a wonderful printmaker. Sonia Romero, Frank Romero's daughter, she has her own studio. It's called She Who Rides the Lion, and she's been doing really incredible work using print, and she prints and then she stuffs the print. She does like this little three-dimensional constructions, really interesting work. So, and out of self-help, there is a new group of printmakers who are in their early 20s. So it's very much. It's interesting because at the universities they're closing some of the printmaking departments. Even Otis Parsons is thinking of closing the printmaking department, which I think it's a big mistake. Because they say, oh, most students just want to do computer work. But you know, if the computer should be another tool, not a tool to end up with, you know, substitute the printmaking tradition, which is so incredible. And the thing is, you know, printmaking in the United States is having a re-emergence. Filagrafica last year, you know, what it's been done is so experimental. People are pushing the medium to do incredible works, you know, where even the whole idea of editioning, it's been substituted by more experimentation and using each print as a way of exploring the medium more and more and more. So I think the whole idea of closing departments at universities it's pitiful. They're not like seeing what's really happening. There are workshops opening up all over the nation.
One of the things that I see from another point is that there's quite a lot of production, but very little interpretation, very little critical analysis.
Yeah, that's
the
right.
critics are not, you know, painting and sculpture and the traditional, maybe even photography, but printmaking. I think it's sort of like we really need to help younger scholars because I think a lot of the people, as you well know, think the way the ecology, the whole ecology, the artist needs the catalog writer, the art historian, the curator, all of that to sort of like put your works and push them through the whole ecosystem. And I think that the analysis, the critical interpretation, is really lacking. And even in books on Latino art, they pick very few printmakers to talk about. And I think that's a lack that we have to sort of like.
I think it comes in a way because printmaking in a way is so technical, you know. And some people see work on paper and they don't know what an etching, what a relief print, what a colograph. They don't know the difference.
Right.
And it's happened to me, you know, at self-help, you know, because when we do the sales, people come and say, oh, I like that drawing. I say, that's not a drawing, that's a relief print. Oh, what's a relief print? And you have to tell them because a lot of people don't know. So they don't really appreciate the effort, the labor. Sometimes creating a print is harder than doing a painting. Because inking, you know, it's not just, it's just coming with the concept, creating the plate, inking it, printing it, it's a long process. And then people say, oh, it's just a work on paper. But, you know, sometimes that work on paper has more labor.
Yeah, and the vocabulary. Yeah. You know, it's not used, the technical vocabulary for each process is very much a part of the people that are making it, but not a part of the audiences that's looking at it.
Absolutely.
At this point, I mean, at one time, I guess people knew the difference. But
and the whole thing of paper, you know, most people think, you know, because, I mean, in this society, there's so much waste people throw away. I always tell them, every time I tell my students, every time you do a print and you take that paper in your hands, remember that was a tree at one point. We're connected to nature. This is a living thing, you know. Have more respect when you use your paper. Don't waste it. Try to use it, and if you can use it again, and don't throw a print that you can work on it more, because it was a tree. Think about, you know. And they say, oh, but we're living in a society of waste. That's another one of my themes, you know. Because in Los Angeles, it's incredible the amount of even supplies. You know, I went to Gemini Gel. I know two of the people who work there, and they were going to throw away all these inks. They were high quality inks because they had like half a jar or something. And I said, don't throw anything. If you don't want it, I'll take it. I'll take it to self-help. I'll use some of it. I'll distribute it among the los de abajo who are always scraping by their, you know. And paper, if it's a little, it's the corner is, I said, don't throw paper away. Just give it to me. It's incredible. And I give workshops to children a lot. And what I do is I go to places where they cut plexiglass. They throw away all the small pieces. you can teach a workshop without buying anything in Los Angeles because of the waste.
Yeah, recyclable,
Yeah.
but it's also a value.
Mhm,
And
mhm,
so to teach people how to have that value,
mhm,
as we say, hacer de tripas corazón,
mhm,
to make something out of
mhm,
nothing,
mhm.
to
Yeah,
use every
yeah,
bit
yeah.
and to actually, the
Yeah,
food,
yeah,
everything in
yeah,
your working class, certainly,
yeah, yeah,
you learn how to no hay desperdicio,
yeah, yeah,
And so
yeah,
I think it's an important value
yeah.
in a consumer society too.
Absolutely. I learned, my grandmother, she was like, she used every little, she became an orphan when she was 6. She lost her father, and her mother was a very delicate woman, so she was the one who worked. And actually, she always said, yo hecho de todo menos putear. She was quite a character. But she taught me, you never throw anything away that you can use more than once.
So how do you see now your own trajectory? Are you now at the point where you feel that since you're working a lot as a teacher, you think that's an important role for you, or?
It's I don't teach full time. I teach sporadically because I do my own work at the studio, and I also work with my husband. We collaborate a lot in film and stuff, and I love to write. And so, but yeah, teaching for me is really important because I think, we're here for a purpose. You learn. When I kick the bucket, if I haven't shared it with somebody else, what a waste. So you have to not only like absorb and develop. You have to make sure that somebody else takes that with them also. It's I think that's what we're here for in a way. It's it gives your life a sense of purpose too.
And finally, the other question has to do with like yourself as an artist and your work in the studio, and then your work with a group, with a collaborative. I think that negotiation or transition, sometimes it's not easy for people to do both.
It's not easy. It's a lot of work. My husband is always saying, "You were working always for other people. Do some work," because I work a lot in my studio, but then I work overtime. So sometimes he tells me, "You're working too much." Yeah, I'm here too. Anyway, but it's hard. Especially Los de Abajo. I'm the sort of the mover and shaker. Especially even economically, because sometimes most of the members are so broke most of the time. So. It's
hard to make it as an artist.
It's a burden, in a way. Yeah, it's hard. You have to keep pushing, and sometimes I get a little tired that I have to, okay, guys, let's go, let's move it. And sometimes it affects my work in the sense that I dedicate a lot to Los Abajo, and then when I go to my studio to my own work, I'm a little tired, But I think it's worth it, And it's not that I haven't been doing my own work. Every year I have my own exhibitions and stuff. But it's a challenge, but I like it. I can't just do one thing. I've always been like that all my life. I guess I learned from my grandmother, de todo menos putear.
Right, that's a nice way to end.
Yeah.
De todos menos puteando.
Yeah.
How would you translate it?
Everything except whoring.
We're going to do an addendum. There's a mythic character for a lot of printmakers in the Latino community, and certainly the Chicano community in LA. And that myth is Sister Karen. As a person, and you work with her, maybe a little brief remembrance of her when you first got there, and then your experiences with her. Okay,
well, as I was telling to us, the first time I went to self-help, I went because I met Sam Barai, who is also a wonderful printmaker who used to be on the board at self-help. And he told me, Poli, you need a place where you can do your prints. Why don't you talk to Sister Karen? So I went to visit her, and when I opened her office, I was telling her, all this smoke came out. I almost choked. And there was this woman inside, and they had told me she was a nun, but she didn't dress as a nun. And she was sitting there with her cigarette, like, "What do you want?" And I'm like, "Hi, I'm this artist from Puerto Rico." He said, "Oh, you're an artist? Let me see what you have." And then she said, "If you're going to come here, you have to first take some of the workshops, and then we'll see if you can stay and work." And I said, "Sure." So it was, the beginning of a wonderful relationship, as they say in the movie Casablanca. So she was a wonderfully generous person, very demanding, which is great. That's how she kept the institution going. Otherwise, it would have fallen apart. Very demanding, and and she was a very generous soul, but she didn't show it to a lot of people, because you know how people are, you give them a finger and they take the whole arm. She was very careful on how much she gave, but once she trusted you, she could be the most incredible human being. I went to her house. She lived she had the cutest little house, but very Spartan. She had a beautiful garden. She loved gardening. She loved margaritas. But she was she had an incredible eye for art. Every time we did a workshop, she would come to see all the work, and she would say, "Self-help keeps this one, this one, this one." I would say, "Sister!" She always picked the best ones, So, I mean, that eye was, she could tell a mile away what was worth something, like what was a valuable piece of art. And she taught me a lot about discipline, and not giving up, because she was a fighter. And when she passed away, it was like we all became orphans in a way. We lost the big mother figure. She was like an earth mother. So, and I know she's up there. Como hay un chiste, there's a famous joke, Sister Angelita, I don't know if you know. There was this nun that was very saintly. I mean, she was incredible, and even at the convent they said, "Oh, she's a saint, she's a saint." When she passed away, her spirit went like a rocket, and in heaven, San Pedro had this orchestra waiting for Sister Angelita, and they had a big party, but her spirit was so light, it kept going up. And people in heaven, "Oh my God,
way beyond heaven,
there
right?
goes Sister Angelita." And San Pedro says, "Angelita, tírate aunque sea un coño a ver si bajas." But Sister Karen, I know she's up there.
Más allá. Well, Poli, thank you very much.
Okay,
I think
you're
this is
welcome.
going to be, these anecdotes will add a lot.